Hello everybody. We're gonna build a new game. This one is to test the Shift API of Solana Labs. And I think we're gonna build something along the lines of Blob Hero or Vampire Survivors. So it's this game where you just walk around and you kill tons of monsters. So what we have so far is I downloaded this free package here, simple mobile input. And I basically used the demo scene from them, and now I can move around here with either the trackpad, and I changed the script here a little bit to also work with keyboard input. So now I can already walk around, and I have this little cube here, and it doesn't look super nice. So the first thing I can do is I gonna make it a bit nicer. So I probably won't gonna have lots of graphics, but at least like it should still look nice. So what I'm planning to do is to have some checker grid here. So I downloaded this checker grid, and I added this as a texture to the floor. And then I also want to have some kind of bloom effect. So here on the canvas. So I was looking at post-processing effects with the universal render pipeline. And these we can enable on the camera. And now as soon as the cube is emitting a light, so if we have like emission, then we have this nice glowing cube here. And this looks already much nicer, I think. And like this we at least have a little bit of graphics. And then we're gonna add a few nice effects. And then yeah, we're hopefully gonna look nice. And then we will use the Shift API to be able to purchase characters and game assets. And the idea is probably that we generate a token in the client, and then later, if you want, you can add an email address to it. So like that, we will be able to play immediately, and later we can then withdraw our assets or add more security to our account if we want to move it from one device to another. So let's see how this goes. Next thing we need, of course, is that the characters can move. So I added this nav mesh here on the plane. So we have a nav mesh surface, and then we have this cube, which has a nav mesh agent, and this base enemy here. And in the base enemy, we have the nav mesh agent, and on update, we set the trigger to the target, which we can define in the game object. And then we have here on trigger enter, we subtract the health, and if the health is at 0, then we kill this enemy. So let's see if that works. So this navmesh agent can then later be defined per enemy, and every enemy will probably have its own prefab and a scriptable object where we can combine it. And yeah, so he always moves to the player now, and if I move around, then he will follow me. So these navmesh agents are actually very nice. I hope they have the performance is good enough of them if we have like a few thousand enemies, but that we will see later. And we will also definitely need some kind of object pool for the bullets and the enemies, because we're gonna have so many of them. And now let's see, I have this bullet here, and as soon as the bullet hits the enemy, it should die, but that doesn't work yet. So that's the next step, that we can have bullets, and then we will have some kind of skills that we can attach to the player. And then if he collects these skills, then they will all be added to the player, and then these skills will autonomously shoot depending on what their logic is. So the first one will probably be just a normal shot, and then there will be this rotating shot around the player and stuff like that. And then whatever we can come up with. So to see if we can have enough enemies, I did some testing on navmesh agents. So now we have like the 3000 cubes here. And I also added the first skill. It's a single shot skill. And it can have like different variables here. So cooldown is 0.2 and the speed of the bullets will be 100. And I looked at the performance, and it turned out it wasn't fast enough. But then I looked on the profiler, and the actual reason why it wasn't fast enough was that the editor loop was too slow, because I had all these cubes selected. So you can see as soon as I select all 1000 cubes, it becomes super slow and slunky. But yeah, now if the cubes are even like can push me up, so I can walk over the cubes. So let's try to get here to the side, and then let's see if we can destroy a few of these cubes. So you can see now I have this the single shot skill, and it has some nice particle effects, and I can kill these cubes. And yeah, now what we need to do is we need a health bar for the player, we need experience that the cubes drop, we need probably 2-3 different enemies, a boss, then we need 2 different skills that we can level up. And I think we're gonna go for 16 skills, hopefully, if there's enough time. And yeah, then this should be enough. So yeah, see you guys in a bit. So I did a few more performance improvements. For the cube, for example, I enabled GPU instancing, so we can basically render as many cubes as we want at the same time. And I also reduced the quality of the obstacle avoidance, which also gave a few frames. So yeah, now I think it's looking good enough. I think 3,000-4,000 enemies at the same time are probably enough for the first iteration. So if we lower the cooldown of the skill, it actually already looks quite cool. So now there's not really a challenge yet, since these can't damage me and so on, and they don't drop anything, and I can't level up skills. But here we can already see that it's probably gonna look quite cool and gonna be fun eventually at some point. So another little performance improvement I just did is I added object pooling so that all the shots and enemies get reused. So I just found this MIT license object pooling for Unity package, and I put it in the game. And now we are at 200 FPS. So everything runs below 500 milliseconds, even with 3,000 enemies. So that should be good enough even for mobile, probably. And in the code, it looks like this. I'm just creating a new pool, and then I find the closest enemy, and then I shoot. So now it looks like the biggest performance penalty here is the base enemy update function, which takes 1.4 milliseconds, and all it does is it sets the new destination to the player. So I guess this we can just do every few seconds. And I will also probably remove the update function from the enemy and have like an enemy manager, which like goes over all enemies. And then we only have one update function, because every of these Unity functions has a performance overhead. So I will try to remove these. And then maybe we are good enough for performance optimization, then we can start building the skills. So now we are almost at 1000 FPS. So how I did this is, you can see that now the biggest part is the rendering, which is okay because there's some kind of gloom filter on the cubes. So, and how we did this is we have now the enemy spawner, which is spawning enemies. And as soon as an enemy is spawned, it registers this with the enemy manager. And the enemy manager has a list of enemy interfaces, and the enemy interface has an onUpdate function. And here in fixed update, we just go over all enemies and call on update. So we have not anymore the overhead of the update. And now we can spawn a bunch of enemies. So I can here define the radius and the cooldown. So if I put the cooldown on 0.1, we can see there's already a bunch of enemies spawning here in this area. And now, just for fun, we can also decrease here the cooldown of our shooting. And we can make it a bit faster. So now we can also kill all these enemies. And we can see, even with this crazy amount of enemies, our biggest thing is still the player movement update. And yeah, so I think performance-wise we are good enough now. So now let's implement some new skills. So next I added this, one of my favorite packages. It's called frictionless. And what it does, it has a nice message hub and a service factory, so it makes it very easy to register singletons. So for example, now I have the player controller, and it has just register singleton, and whenever I spawn an enemy, I can just resolve the player controller and use the game object. And the next thing I did is I made some nice particle effects. So whenever I hit an enemy now, there's a destroy animation, and if I put a little bit less damage, then you can see when I hit first time there's a hit, and then there's a plosh when it's destroyed. And then I found this funny package here that gives some extra textures to capsules, because I thought it looks a bit boring. But sadly they don't work with the universal render pipeline. So I ended up just using a particle texture for the capsule, and now it looks like it's a little ghost. So yeah, this looks already much nicer, and can also shoot faster and have more enemies and so on. So if I increase here the cooldown, then you can see it's already starting to get fun. Pew, 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 pew. Now I added another one of my favorite packages. It's called DoTween. So I just downloaded it, added it to the project. And then I added this little punch scale here. Whenever an enemy gets hit, so now whenever an enemy gets hit, it wobbles a little bit until it dies. So that looks way nicer. So let me reduce the damage a little bit so you can see it. Boom, boom, boom. Just a small detail, but it looks way nicer, feels better. So now I changed it so that the XP is not gotten from killing the enemies, but instead of collecting these green dots here, because the other games also did it like this. And it feels already better because you need to move a lot more to collect these dots again. Now I changed it a little bit so that you need to collect these bubbles, but they will fly after you until you stand still. So this gives a little bit more variety of your movement, because now every time I want to collect these balls, I need to stand still for a while and the enemies can catch up. So now it's already getting quite addictive, because you always want to get these bubbles and then you need to stand still to get them, and then you get the XP. And I also made it so that now I can also move diagonally with the keyboard and as well with the joystick. So now it will work on all platforms. You can use WASD and the arrow keys and the joystick. And to calculate the XP, I actually just asked ChatGPT to write me an XP function, because I don't really need to write this myself. And I looked at the Pokemon XP functions as well. And yeah, what we go for now is like just 10% more XP per level. And then in the code, it looks like this. I have a player HUD, which just on update currently updates the slider value and the current XP. Probably we need to change it later to some kind of event system. And then in the player controller, I just copy pasted the ChatGPT code and it's calculating me the level. So whenever I collect now these little green dots, then my level goes up. And as soon as I get a level up, there's also a little bit of confetti, and then we will spawn skills. And I thought the idea is that instead of having, like the other games, have these pop-ups which like ask you to select your skills, which also always interrupts the gameplay a little bit, I was thinking if you could just spawn the skills somewhere on the field so that you have to collect them there, which emphasizes even more that the game is about movement constantly and avoiding and like having either go risky towards the enemies or go away from the enemies. So let's see if this will work out. Otherwise, in the end, we can just always do like three panels where you select your skills. So I added the second skill. This is a rotating banana, which flies around my character, and whenever I hit someone, then yeah, it does damage. And yeah, as soon as I get a level up, then you can see that these three smiley faces fall out here. And if I collect these, so they have no icons yet, but if I collect one of these, they will either increase my single shot skill or my banana skill currently, the rotating one. And how this works is I have these scriptable objects here, one per skill type. So it's the rotating shot skill and the single shot skill. And they also have a prefab and they have config for all the different parameters of the skill. So there's damage, cooldown, speed, range, percentages for the passive skills that come later, and extra bullets. And here you can see the rotating banana skill already starts with 1 bullet, then he gets 2 bullets. And on level 4 it gets 3 bullets, and then at the end it will be 5 bullets. So they will quickly rotate around the player and kill everything that's around. So I think this will be a very a skill that people will like a lot. And how this works is here on the player controller there's a skill controller. And this one has the skill configs, also all the available skills, in this case the rotating skill and the single shot skill, and also an active skill. And the active skills will be added here, and then they will here, yeah, they have an update loop and they just do what they want. So it's very composable, so I can just add any skill now on the player and it will work and attack enemies. And yeah, in the code it looks like this, that there is this skill controller, which where you can add a new skill, and then it spawns this little skill blob, and then there are these 3 skill blobs, and as soon as I collect one, the other 2 will disappear. So I hope this will be, will always have the choice which ones you will want to level up. And another thing I added is like these little blimps here that show how much damage you did, and also when you have a level up for a skill, it shows the skill name and the current name of the skill. So this is now single shot skill level 1. Okay, and now we need some challenge. So we need to add probably a health bar, and the enemies need to make damage. And then we need probably a boss and more enemies as well. So let's do that now. So now we also have a boss. So the spawning is now time-based, and at 4-minute mark, the first boss will spawn. And you can see the banana skill is already very strong, so I can just go in here and kill him. And I now have also 3 different characters that I can choose from. So if I delete my player prefs here, you will see that we need to sign up first with an email address. And then we will be able to buy certain assets. So let's say Jonas at blah. So we log in. So now we are logged in, and now if I click on one of these other characters, then we're minting the asset already using the Shift API. So now I can use the Fire Mage, and the Fire Mage starts with some extra skills, which can be defined in the players somewhere. So here are all the different characters, and here you can see you can define the skill amount that they start with, and also some extra attributes. So I could now say the Fire Mage starts with 5 fireballs and also has 10% more damage or something like this. And the Shift API currently works like this, that the API key is in the client, and I can log in or register with my email, and it generates a Shift ID. And then it directly uses the Shift API to create the user, and here in the register function. And then I can get all the assets, which will give me all the assets back. So that's what I'm using in this login screen to either let you select the asset or let you buy the asset. And then here I can create the asset, which creates this JSON file here, and then uses the Shift API to create the asset. The only problem is still that the Shift API is in the client. So now I'm working on putting it a wrapper into a Next.js app that we then can call from Unity, and then we add the API key in the backend. So we have 3 new features now this time. So the first one is health bar and damage from enemies. So you can see here I can walk around and kill these enemies, but if I stand still, then they start attacking me and my health bar goes down. So how this works is the player movement now has a health bar here, and the health bar script is very simple. It's just a slider which sets a value, and the set value is set in the player controller function hit, and the hit takes damage, and when my health goes below 0, then I die and I just reload the scene for now. And the hit is called from the base enemy, and the enemy just calls hit with his damage on the player controller as soon as he's in range and his cooldown is reached. So every, I don't know, half a second or so, they will attack. And the second feature is that we now have this enemy spawner, which has wave configs. So here I have defined 5 different wave configs. If the player is level 1, only normal cubes will spawn. If he is level 2, normal cubes will spawn, but a higher amount, so the cooldown is lower. Then from level 5 onwards, there will also be big cubes. They are kind of boss cubes, so they are red and have more health. And then in the 5th stage, the cooldown is 0.3, so every 0.3 seconds a new cube will spawn, and it might be either big cube or normal cube. And then at some point we will also add a boss, and yeah, then I think if you beat the boss, you win the game. So this will be stage 1. And then the next thing I did, I created the first user in the Gameshift API. So here we can see we can just register a user, and we just need to put in a reference ID and an email address. And I did this already for a user called test user. Gonna show you this here. So we have get user. So now I call the Shift API, and I call it, just the REST API user, and then the name of the user, his reference ID. And let's see if we can hit this. If I just restart the game, we should hit this breakpoint, and we can look at the data we are getting back from the Shift API. And later we will then, the ID of the user will be generated in the client. So this is a SHA-258 hash from the date and the random value. And then only the client will know this ID, and then he can use it in the API to perform certain actions. But we can't put the API key in the client because then everyone would see it like you just did. So we need to wrap it into another API. So and this is the result we're getting back from the registered user, the test user, and then his user address, and then his email address. And then later we can also, I already created a collection here. So we can create a collection, and then we can create assets into this collection. And these will then be different characters that you can play. And for these characters to be able to play, the next thing I'm gonna build is a character customization controller, which will have different characters, and then I will mint NFTs depending on which characters you own. So let's build that now. This is how this customization controller ended up looking, by the way. So we have this pop-up in the beginning, which lets you select the character, and if you don't have it yet, then it does the call to the mint asset API. And then as soon as we have it, we'll be able to select it. And then when we start the game, we instantiate this character. So for example, now if I start with the Fire Mage, we can see that we have this Fire Mage here. And as you can see here in our simple player movement, we have the player character customization controller, and it has these 3 configs. So it has the Fire Mage, the monkey, and every one of these has like also rotating like skill amount and also extra attributes, and it spawns the classic the graphics here under the graphics root. And in the code it's like very simple actually. It's just a Modi behavior, and it has one function which is called spawn character by character ID. The character ID is either default, then it's just the fairy with a white image, or monkey or Fire Mage. And then if it has this config, then it instantiates the graphics under the graphics root. And then it goes through the extra skills and adds every one of these skills to the character. And then you can start playing with it. Released, so you can watch the Breakpoint talk on YouTube. And you can sign up for Gameshift, and then you will be able to get your own API key. And then you can immediately start playing around with it in Swagger under API gameshift.dev. And then you can, for example, here create new users, you can create assets, you can create collections for your assets, and you are also apparently already able to do checkouts via USD. So yeah, play around with it. The game is now live and playable. You can also export it to Android, iOS, WebGL, probably would also run on Switch or something if you export it from Unity. The repository for the game you can find under Solana developers /Cubeshift. I will move it over there soon. And yeah, so you just open it in Unity. The main scene is the main scene where you can play the game. And a few words to the Next.js API. So I removed the API key from within Unity because otherwise every player could just do everything with the API. And I wrapped it in this Next.js app, which I deployed to Vercel. So currently there's the user, which will get you user info. Then there's the register, which lets you register. So it always has like the Shift API, and then it just here does /users. So basically similar to what you see here in this API. And then from there, you can also get all the assets for a user. So it's just fetch, Shift API, users, the user, and the assets. And you can mint assets. And for the mint assets, it's Shift API. Then there is here, depending on which asset ID you put in, you will get the monkey JSON, which has like banana skill on level 3. Or you will get the Fire Mage JSON, which has like Fireball at 1 and Firebolt at level 2. And then all it does is it calls the Shift API with assets, and then it puts in the NFT JSON payload. So yeah, like this you can build your own API, do whatever you want. You probably would want to have like some proper login mechanism from the client. Like what I currently do is I just have a token, and only the client knows the token. So if you want to get from one device to another, the client would somehow need to export this token and import this token. The benefit is like it's super easy to use. Like I've used it sometimes in games where I worked that were only played on one device usually, and if you played on another device, okay, then you just need to get your token over. But these days maybe you want to have like a Google login or whatever other login, and then you just with this login, as soon as the player is authenticated, then you use this API in the backend. Yeah, I hope this helped a little bit. I just recorded a bit every day what happened. So it's not a very detailed tutorial, but you can just look at the code and try it out and yeah, play the game. And yeah, see you guys next time. Bye bye.